Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Thursday, April 16th. It is 7:01. I am calling the school committee meeting to order. I need to read a statement. Pursuant to the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Holliston School Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the HCAT webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the governor's emergency action requiring keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. This time I will do a roll call attendance.
Are you calling me, Stacy? Because you're freezing. Sorry, it's Cynthia.
No, but Mrs. Listevnik.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
No, that's okay. Mrs. Hanstead?
Yes.
Ms. Shaughnessy?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Koshin?
Yes.
Is Dawn on? Ms. Naborski?
Present.
And Mrs. Raffi, yes. Okay, I will accept a motion to approve remote participation for this evening.
So moved by Dawn. Okay, second Ann Louise.
Moved by Dawn Naborski, seconded by Ann Louise Henstead. Roll call vote. Ms. Naborski?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Shaughnessy?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanstead?
Yes, you can call me Ms. Hanstead.
Okay. Mrs. Listevnik?
Yes.
And Ms. Koshin?
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. First order of business. Our meeting minutes from April 2nd regular session. Are there any questions or comments? Joan?
I just sent a few amendments, edits to Lisa this afternoon. They were not substantive, and she made those and put them on the drive. I just wanted to call your attention to the fact that they have been edited since the last time you've seen them, but not in a material way.
Okay. Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the April 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes of a regular session?
Moved by Joan.
Seconded by Cynthia.
Moved by Joan, seconded by Cynthia. All in favor, roll call vote. Ms. Naborski?
Yes.
Ms. Shaughnessy?
Yes.
Ms. Hanstead?
Yes.
Mrs. Listevnik?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Koshin?
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. Okay. Our special meeting on April 7th, 2020. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, is there a motion to approve our April 7th, 2020 special school committee minutes?
Moved by Dawn.
Seconded by Andy.
Moved by Dawn, seconded by Andy. All in favor? Ms. Naborski?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Shaughnessy?
Yes.
Ms. Hanstead?
Yes, sorry.
Mrs. Listevnik?
Yes.
Ms. Koshin?
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. Thank you. Our executive session meeting minutes from March 26th. Any questions or comments? Okay, the motion's going to be to approve the minutes from March 26th, 2020 and retain them.
Moved by Cynthia.
Seconded by Joan.
Moved by Cynthia, seconded by Joan. All in favor? Ms. Naborski,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Ms. Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Ms. Hanstead,
Yes.
Mrs. Listevnik,
Yes.
Ms. Koshin,
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda, we actually have communications, oral comment from school committee members. We haven't done this in a couple of weeks officially. So do you just want to raise your hands if you want to make a comment? This is our public comment time. Anne Louise?
This is just a small comment thanking our teachers because I've, like all of you, been watching what's going on like from a distance in the hallway, the teaching, and also listening to what my daughter has to say about the efforts her teachers are putting in. And it's extraordinary. And not only that, what was really interesting today was the last day of the term. Mary came down and she said, I think that might be the last time I'm going to see them. And it was such an emotional moment. Like it just dawned on her. And I think it was the same for the teachers based on some comments that she shared. And, I'm sorry it wasn't in person, and hopefully there will be an opportunity for that. But clearly, despite this really difficult situation, they've found a way to connect and make it work. And, at least in our household, it's been meaningful. So thank you to the teachers for doing that.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I too actually just wanted to do a shout out to thank the teachers. I have kids in 3 different schools, and I know they're all trying to make it work, and I really appreciate all the effort that they're putting into it. And the only other thing that I wanted to just notify the public about was to make sure that you fill out your census. It's vitally important. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So I too want to echo the sentiments of my fellow committee members in terms of the teachers and the staff and the administrators and all the work they're doing. Just to everyone, we're in this together. We're all doing our best. Parents, students, the whole community. So keep up the good work, and we'll get through this. Brad, I'm going to move to you.
Thank you. I had 3 things I wanted to comment on tonight briefly. The first is today at 1 o'clock, we held a Zoom meeting of all our paraprofessionals in Holliston. Ms. Kamiri and I hosted it and had an opportunity to thank them for their incredible work that they're doing. These are folks that are also working without a net and are using this opportunity to provide not only to partake in some excellent professional development opportunities that we had put together, but they are now obviously transitioning to specific student support roles, both in Zoom and in small groups and large groups and individual support. So I wanted to, in addition to thanking the teachers and frankly thanking everyone, I did also want to give a shout out to the paraprofessionals who are really stepping up and really doing work that, like all of us, is work that we're discovering along the way. The second brief comment I wanted to make is that we have a new member of our senior administrative team. Her name is Dr. Jamie Slaney. Jamie, the principal of Placentino, has completed her doctoral studies at Boston College. And while she will not be able to participate in graduation in May, she and her gown, a cap and gown ceremony is being postponed. She has earned all her credits and has received her doctoral degree from Boston College. And I want to congratulate her on that. And Keith, can you, yay, Jamie. Keith, can you allow me to share my screen, please? See if we can make this happen this time, Keith.
You just have to grab it.
We've been practicing. We practiced this once. How we doing? Any luck? Let me try it one more time here, people. Share screen. So that should, can everybody hear me still? Thumbs up? Yep, good, okay. Recently, you all got an email from me that included 2 videos, that one of which I wanted to share, which is a video of how one of our high school choruses performing one of the songs they were planning on performing about 3 days after we shut down school. So hopefully this will work.
Oh, blow the man down, bullies, blow the man down. To me way, hey, blow the man down. Blow the man down, bullies, blow him away. Give me some time to blow the man down. We went over the bar on the 13th of May. Hey, blow the man down. The gal jumped and the gal came away. Oh, give me some time to blow the man down. So walking down the street, blow the man down. I saw a young damsel, I happened to meet. Give me some time to blow the man down. I said to her, Dolly, and how do you do? Blow the man down. Said she no look at her for seeing you. Give me some time to blow the man down. Oh, say.
So I just wanted to share that briefly with everyone. Hopefully that is now we're viewing Keith's screen. So if we can, you can unscreen that. So, I wanted to, it's so exciting to see our students happy and performing. And I wanted to, because I think this is an example of the thinking that's people have been required to put together to make a lot of these things happen. So Max Everard, who's our choral director, I asked him how you go about putting together that performance. And I'm going to read what he said because I don't understand it, and I should, but I don't. But anyhow, the students all recorded their individual parts using their phones or other recording whatever recording software they had on their phone, typically just a camera app or whatever. Then he used GarageBand to edit the audio, and iMovie to edit the individual videos, then Filmora to create the layout, and then finish the movies in iMovies to add any titles or final effects. So that's a pretty amazing amount of work to create 1 3-minute performance, of which I only showed you 1 minute, in addition to all of the work the students had to do to learn their song, and also to be able to be comfortable singing it in essentially by yourself. With some, they had some guidance in their ears so they could hear the beat in their ears. But it is really, we've seen those on the internet, and I just wanted to share one from Holliston High School that kind of made my heart sing. That's all I have tonight.
That's great. Thank you. And congrats to those students. That was great. Peter?
Because building upon that a bit, if you haven't seen the Art Saves Lives site, the work that kids are producing is spectacular. And it's a credit to the kids and to Doug Lack and the whole arts and music staff for putting that together and bringing that to life. I think it just really represents, it started from day one of this situation, the creativity, collaboration, and problem solving that our teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals, and students have put forth. I've talked to a lot of places in the region, and some are doing well as well, but some are struggling. And I think the unity by which our community pulled together to do the very best we can for kids and still be alive and working and creating it's a pretty, I think we're going to be able to build upon this in major ways. So it's a pretty special thing.
Keith, do you have anything tonight? No? Okay. And finally, our students, my apologies, Mary and Anya, I usually have you go first, but I've been trying to just follow the squares on my screen and you guys were in the midst. So please do not feel like I was dissing you. So both of you.
Yeah, just thank you to all the teachers and all the work they've been doing. I think they've been doing a great job adapting to everything.
Mary? She looks frozen.
She does look frozen. Mary?
Yeah, she said she's frozen, but that same thing. Thank you to all the teachers.
Do either of you have any information you want to share with the committee at this point?
Not on my behalf. I can ask Mary.
Thank God for text messaging.
Yeah.
Well, Anya shared her news, right? A couple of meetings ago.
Yes, and I don't think Mary has fully made a decision yet, so she will let us know when she does.
Excellent. So best of luck on term 4. I can't believe you're there. All right. It's great to see you guys tonight.
Thank you.
Brad, let's go on to old business, school start times, implementation update.
I don't have anything to report under that agenda item. We just keep it there as a running agenda item. I have to be honest that we have been focusing on retooling for this year. We did have the conversation about the impact study. I did share that the fact that we were not going to be doing an impact study with the parents that I had been corresponding with about the impact study, and all of them responded that they understood and couldn't see another way to do it as well. So I did want to share that and follow up with the committee on that.
Okay, don't go too far because now you have to give an update on COVID-19. Oh, Lisa, did you have a question?
I just wanted to ask about the transportation audit. I just vaguely remember that we were going to expect to get results of that in April, but I'm not sure if they were able to do everything that they were planning to do in terms of collecting data before we got shut down. So I just wanted to ask Keith about that.
I haven't had a chance to reach out to him. I'm going to have to do that. I'm hoping next week is going to be a little better week for me work-wise, so I'll definitely reach out to him and see if I can do something to report for you. You are right. I mean, you won't be able to do any sort of site-based study, so we'll see.
Oh, wait, I didn't totally catch that. Were they able to get the data that they needed before we shut down?
He has the physical data, the database type data. What he wouldn't be able to get is like site-based things like watching traffic patterns and things like that in and around town. He wouldn't be able to follow a bus, for example. So he
wasn't done collecting.
No.
Okay. Okay. That's what I was wondering. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Brad.
I did want to report out on 2 things. to the committee regarding our implementation of our remote learning plan. Of most importance to me is the results of our week 1 remote learning plan in terms of student participation. Admittedly, we will get better at this, but we didn't have a coordinated approach to how we were going to measure student participation. So this data is not comparable between and among schools, but I did want to share what we had in terms of data. At the high school, we did our first goal, as it is in all of our schools, is to check in and make sure that we have students who are accessing in general. During the first week, so this is now, we're almost at the end of the second week, so I'm reporting data as of last Friday. As of last Friday, last week, we had a number of students who had not accessed anything in terms of either their Google Classroom or their Gmail. In the 9th grade, there were 3 students. In the 10th grade, there were 11 students. There were 10 juniors and 9 seniors. Those specific names were shared with guidance and with our counseling staff. Each one of those students has been checked in with and connected with. They are in some cases, most cases, connecting with counselors and have had connections with counselors previous to that, but they're not yet ready to engage in classwork. And many of these students were, frankly, struggling before we went out. So these were students that were on our radar, and we continue to stay connected with them to provide them with the social and emotional support that they need. Ms. Bottomley also sent out a survey to students to assess their feedback about week 1. The turnout, the response rate was lower than we would both hope, about 145 students. Based on those responses, however, 45% of the students said that the live sessions combined with independent work had been about the right amount of work. 17% said that it was too much work, and 37% that it depended on the class. In terms of participation, a survey went out to the faculty. 75% of the teachers report that an average of 80% of more of their students was attending their live sessions. Specifically, 52.5% report that 90 to 100% of students were in attendance at their live sessions, and 22.5% were of teachers reported that 80 to 90% of their students were in attendance. At the middle school, by 5 p.m. last Friday, we had made connections with all but 3 of our students. One of those students was connected with by School Resource Officer Woods over the weekend, who made a connection back to the school on Monday we made and connected the family with the school on Monday. And the other 2 were connected with directly by Principal Jordan over the weekend, who reached out to the family personally to connect with those 2 students. The middle school has put together a very comprehensive way to track assignments returned. So they chose to assess student participation using the number of the percentage of students who completed all of the work assigned. 2 weeks ago, in the last week of our Enhanced Learning Opportunities Plan, 33% of the middle school students had completed all of the work assigned to them during that week. In the first week of the remote learning plan, that went up to 50%. We consider normal in a brick and mortar case to be somewhere between 85 and 90%, because again, this is all assignments. And there can be students who are sick. There can be students that have to leave halfway through the day, miss an assignment, et cetera. So we're at 50%. And again, these numbers are going to continue to be followed as we continue through our remote learning process. Miller, they are measuring, they're focusing on connections and reciprocal interactions. They have found that 97 to 99%, depending on the grade level, of students are participating in the Zoom sessions. They measured, in terms of assignment completion, they measured completed at least one assignment as opposed to completing all assignments. So you can see we still have to kind of consolidate some of our data gathering. Last week, 60% of the third graders completed at least one assignment. 62% of the fourth graders completed at least one of the assignments. And 87% of the eighth graders completed at least one assignment. The reason we believe the discrepancy between third, fourth, and fifth grade is that the third and fourth graders were in week one, were just accessing Google Classroom for the first time. And are still getting used to some of the one-on-one activities through Google Classroom, as opposed to the fifth grade that has been using Google Classroom throughout the course of the year. So we do expect the participation rates at grades 3 and 4 to go up this week, actually, because as they get more used to Google Classroom. At Placentino, 96% of our students are participating in the Zoom calls, and 81% of them have completed at least one assignment. Those are being submitted through Seesaw as opposed to Google Classroom. So that's some of the participation data in week one. I actually feel really positive about this in terms of participation. We're getting some good data. We have to fine tune that data collection and also continue to repeat it and follow these on a weekly basis, which is our plan. And I'll pause there for questions, Ms. Raffi, if the committee has any.
Yeah, Louise.
I think you might have answered one of them in the last second there. So you're going to continue doing this to kind of just keep track and see if there's any improvement. You said, I think that's really important. This is
like attendance.
Yeah.
Really, this is like attendance. This is something we have to do every day now. And we have to also get teachers used to that. Teachers take attendance all the time, but they've been so focusing on just putting a Zoom session together. They haven't been like, okay, 1, 2, who's am I missing? So again, those things are going to come, and I'm very confident in that. But in week one, I think this is a good start for data collection.
I think that really is, Brad, and I have to say I'm encouraged. I mean, there's definitely some clear spotty issues there, and it's part of that probably is just early data collection, and part of it, especially as you get to the younger grades, the unnaturalness of the participation for them is a particular issue. But I think you'll see that across the board at some level. But it is encouraging, and I think it's interesting too if you still have the data relative to when there was kind of optional grading at the high school. It looks like more kids are engaging now, so I find that encouraging as well. I think it has to be matched with qualitative feedback from the teachers on like how things are going, if you will, because it's hard to interpret that just from participation. But I think it's great they're doing this. So thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? No, I think we're good. Dawn?
Hey, and again, thank you. And I know the middle school remote learning or live learning really just started this week, so we're only about 4 days in. But there was, and I thought this was a great idea, they did a survey of parents and students back on, say, like April 4th. I think it was due around April 6th, about what was working and what wasn't working. And if we could maybe get an update on those surveys, and if they're willing to do more surveys as the plan changes. Because I know it's changed a lot this week. This was the first week where they implemented live learning. You'd have a 30-minute session for each of your core classes. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of feedback from families. I know, if you were on team 2 or team 1, there's 4 sections of English, and often all of them would get on the call. And I'd like to see how that develops over time. So if we could get the class size down a little, if their live learning is going to be 30 minutes each week, if we could maybe decrease the number of kids on it, if that's feedback they're getting from the community about it. So I thought it was a great idea that they got ahead of it and had a student and parent survey out there with, I think the results were due around April 6th. But if they're open to doing another one as this evolves, and we could get more information from that, I think that would be very helpful. What's working, what isn't. And just a reminder to parents to make sure you participate in those and look for those each Saturday.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I think participate. I think our first goal was to make connections. Then our next goal is to make meaningful connections. Then our next goal is to improve the instruction within those meaningful connections. So I think it makes it sound like we had a plan, and I think it's just how it turned out. But that is actually how we have evolved. And I think that this data shows minimally that we've made the connections. And now, as you suggest, Dawn, that now we have to do some more digging. First of all, we have to maintain the connection focus and make sure we're still connecting. But we also have to now kind of build some meaning into that and quality. We have to test for quality, not provide quality. We are providing quality. We have to test for quality. If there are no other questions, I did want to report out on one other thing regarding the remote learning plan that has come across several people's desks. And rather than force somebody to ask the question, I'll just answer the question that I know is coming. There has been some concern raised by some parents, particularly of parents of juniors, regarding Ms. Bottomley and my decision to only offer credit and no credit for semester 2 classes and term 4 classes. And I wanted to share a couple of thoughts about that and explain some of the thinking behind it. The first piece of this, which should come as no surprise to anyone, is that we need to recognize that this is not normal, that we are in a place where students are in a uncertain and unfamiliar place, and their ability to do schoolwork at the same quality they were doing it in semester 1 is likely different today than it was in November. And the same is true of our teachers. The teachers were teaching in November in a way and in an environment that they knew and were comfortable with, and now they're teaching in a way and evolving their work in a very proactive, but also a very in a timely way. But it is a work in progress. The decision, and for that reason, and recognizing that distance and remote learning is not the equivalent of classroom learning, The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education included in their guidelines the recommendation to only offer credit or no credit for coursework that was done during the remote learning phase. And that really is an acknowledgement of the unique set of circumstances we're in, and the fact that we have students who aren't able to do the quality of work in right now that they were able to do in semester one. One of the foundational pieces of grading is that a grade needs to mean the same thing at a different period in time. So a B needs to mean a B, and so the challenge is that, and we as a semester-based school, we offer courses both in the same courses in semester A as we do in semester B. So semester one and semester two, excuse me. So let's take an example of Algebra 2. So, and I'm making these numbers up because I haven't looked at the curriculum, but let's assume for the sake of argument that Algebra 2, typically 70% of your grade is made up of 5 end of chapter tests from the Algebra 2 curriculum. And 20% is made up of homework, and 10% is made up with class participation. And that's what, and using those rubrics, giving in-class exams, 5 in-class exams, averaging them, adding a class participation grade, adding a homework grade, the teacher was able to determine whether the student deserved an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F. Well, in semester 2, Algebra 2 doesn't look like that. In semester 2, Algebra 2 is probably not going to cover 5 chapters. Hopefully, it'll cover 4. And again, these are made-up numbers. I'm not suggesting Algebra 2 only does 5 chapters, but these are comparable. I'm just using this for sake of comparison. And as you know, in Algebra 2, the content gets more difficult the later you go in the book because the work is cumulative. We can't recreate the in-class testing environment. We can all admit and agree that even an at-home test or a take-home test typically is designed a different way because it's executed a different way. So we can't recreate those types of things as well. So the content is different, and the assessment process is different, and the entire course structure, even if we had time to restructure it, is different. And in the end, I cannot look anybody in the eye and say that a B in Algebra 2 in semester 1 is the equivalent of a B in Algebra 2 in semester 2. And to me, that is a fundamental need to be able to provide equity and fairness in grading. Even if and this is on top of the fact that I still maintain that there are more students than we know who may be accessing but cannot access to their top ability. This to me ultimately is an issue of fairness. It probably, if you think about it for a minute, it would probably come to no surprise to you to hear me say that one of my most important jobs is to ensure the value of a Holliston High School transcript, so that when Boston College Admissions looks at a transcript that has the Holliston High School seal on the top of it, they know it means something. And they know our reputation, they know the quality of students we provide, they know how difficult or easy a school this is. And they are able to look at that transcript with confidence that it is a transcript coming from a high-performing high school. And they judge our students against that standard. To me, the value of the Holliston High School transcript is one of the most important things that is my job and Ms. Bottomley's job to maintain. And in the end, for the same reasons, I think that DESE has drawn its conclusions that credit and no credit is the most appropriate thing to do in this time of remote learning. Ms. Bottomley and I came to that same conclusion. It's an issue of fairness and it's an issue of quality. And I cannot guarantee that and it is simply impossible to say that the quality of what we're doing now is equivalent to the quality of what we did in semester one. So I wanted to answer that question before it was asked. I know that was somewhat of a long diatribe, but it's something that's important to me. The sanctity, if you will, of the Holliston High School transcript means a great deal to me. In the end, it is the reputation of our school that opens many doors to our students. And then the students then enter through that door and take the remaining steps themselves. But those of us who work in schools know that not all high school transcripts are valued equally by admissions departments. And my ultimate job is to make sure that the Holliston High School's transcript is valued as highly as it is currently and not to devalue it at all. So that's my answer to the question that somebody was going to ask. So I wanted to share that with you. And that is my report on remote learning today.
Okay, Cynthia, then Anne Louise, then Dawn.
Thank you for that response, Brad. I also just wanted to point out, I think it's also an issue of equity. When you consider that there are families right now who have lost their jobs, they may lose their homes, maybe they're sick themselves, children or parents or those who are working in healthcare. And those people will not be able to take advantage of perhaps being able to do all of the work that's necessary for them to get a grade and are being penalized in that kind of system. And I think that's just incredibly unfair and not equitable. And if we're going to talk about an equity lens, we need to make sure that we're making that equal for everyone. And so that I just wanted to say my piece about that. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you very much, Brad. I think that was very helpful. I think it's helpful for parents who have weighed in on both sides of this, and a lot of parents have weighed in on it. And I want to clarify one thing, Cynthia, because I do think there's a nuance to what parents were asking for. The vast majority that I heard from, in fact, all of the ones I heard from, were not asking that we flip from pass-fail to graded. They were asking for the option to be graded if the student felt they were up to the task, able to access the curriculum, the family thought it was okay for that student to pursue that. And I think that's a very different situation. Their intent was not to pursue something that would be inequitable. Almost all of them very proactively acknowledged that for some students, this would not be feasible. Having said that, I can certainly understand where you're coming from, Brad. I agree. There is no comparison to what and how we are teaching now versus the equivalent course in the fall. I think that's a very, very fair statement. And I do believe there needs to be meaning behind the grades. Having said that, it's still a challenge for the students who really feel that this semester is critical for them. And the juniors in particular are up against a tough challenge on that. And I can appreciate that, certainly having gone through it 3 different times. And I'm wondering if there isn't another way to address this that doesn't go on the grade books, that isn't about a letter grade, if you will, but maybe there's an acknowledgement or a certificate of excellence if the teacher feels a student is, going above and beyond, or really digging deep into the material and demonstrating a level of mastery that is more typical of what you would see in some of these courses, and that one distinction could be provided as a formal letter from the district signed by the teacher saying this student earned a certificate of excellence in this course, although it's graded pass fail, and then that goes in with their transcript, when they apply to college. When our students apply, and for instance, they're French immersion students, there's a letter that goes in with respect to what the French immersion program is about if they've completed that. And I think there's other things like that. And I don't know, and maybe that's a bad idea and there's another way, but is there a way to provide some acknowledgement for students that might be helpful, as they go toward the college process? The one example that was brought up to me and I was very sympathetic to, for scheduling reasons, this particular student ended up with their STEM courses in the fall and their humanities courses this semester. This particular child wants to go on to a communications career, and STEM course is not up his alley. So he really struggled through the fall. And then just as he was earning some really good grades coming into the spring, it all, kind of went to hell in a handbasket. So you can see a scenario for a student like that that's trying to demonstrate, this is my thing, this is what I'm good at, and now it's pass fail, is a particular challenge. So anyway, I don't know if there's a way to do that. And I know one suggestion might be, well, they can choose those teachers to write their recommendation letters. They can, but if they haven't really developed a relationship with the teacher, it's hard to do. So is there, and that puts another onus on the teacher. So that's all I'm just wondering, is there another way to acknowledge something for students who want to do that? I don't know. So that's the idea. Sorry.
I think, I don't think that's unreasonable. I think one of the, I've been talking to Dominique Ross, our director of guidance, who believes that there is an opportunity here to create a narrative about a student through this process, if this is a process in which that student thrives. And that can be, whether it be by a teacher, the student themselves, a parent. I think that there are a number of ways to tell the story about how this impacted this student. There is the other, the colleges and universities across the United States. This is not a health crisis that's happening in Holliston. This is a health crisis that's happening in Massachusetts. It's happening in 50 states. There are 27 states right now that have closed school for the rest of the year. 27 states. Transcripts across the country are going to look different this year. For this, particularly for schools that do have semester grades, and that's not all schools. I understand that. Colleges and universities most of them have already said their SAT and ACT optional for next year's, for this current juniors. Colleges and universities are going to have to take a more holistic approach to the admissions process. It is inevitable. They can't, the numerical data that upon which we think they rely, which I don't think they do, but in many cases, but the numerical data, specifically GPA, is not going to be something that's reliable any longer. Frankly, I don't think it's ever been reliable because schools use different formulas to calculate GPA all over the place. There is no universal calculation of GPA. So I think that I agree with you, Anne Louise, that there is a way to turn lemons into lemonade and to help students discover and uncover that personal narrative, the place where they had to dig deep and come out of this at the other end. They may not even be aware of it yet. It may be a passion that they learn about during this process. It may have been any of a number of different things. And I am convinced that colleges and universities are going to look at this semester differently and are going to look at for every junior in the country when their packet crosses their desk, next year's admissions criteria in every college and university in the United States is going to be different than it was this year. It's impossible for it not to be.
So, Pete, before I move to the committee, Peter, were you just touching your face or were you trying to get my attention? You're good. Okay. So, Dawn, Andy, then Lisa, okay?
Thank you. Thank you for that update. And I don't want to reiterate what Anne Louise said, but I do want to say that if there's any way to talk about work with distinction or exemplary work under difficult circumstances, whether it's through a teacher recommendation or a guidance recommendation, or if there's any room for comments in an expanded transcript during this unprecedented time, I think that's important. But I'm also concerned for the long-term planning. So for those kids that are juniors and are going to go into their senior year next fall, I know we still have another 3 months before, or 2 months really, before the summer, but just the long-term contingency planning, would their next semester look like this as well? Is there any room to build in grades if we had to move back to remote or distance learning next year? Just the long-term planning on it too, Brad.
Have a good night. We're going to sign off real quick.
That is a good place to sign. Can I sign off?
Let us know if you need
Mary?
anything in the future.
You guys we need to know where you end up going to college is where
I will keep you posted on that.
Do that.
Only got about 2 more weeks. So
all right. Good luck.
Thank you.
To you both. Stay safe.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. Dawn, I don't have an answer to that question. We haven't even begun that process. I think that I do think that that is a context that we will have to consider, is making sure that we look at that issue at that moment in time. If I had to guess, well, first of all, I can't even guess if we're coming back May 1st. So I agree with you that that's something that has to be considered, and maybe with more time to plan, we could come up with something that we think is worthy of a letter grade from Holliston High School.
Dawn looks like she accidentally floated off. Oh, there you are, Dawn. You moved around. Sorry when the girls got off.
Andy?
Hi, thanks, Stacy. I have, just thinking about my own classes that I teach, concerns with really doing anything different for any of our students above and beyond credit, no credit, pass, fail type of situation. I think it's deeply unfair to that top student. I can think of 2 in the sections that I teach who have some really extenuating circumstances at home. And by giving another student that leg up of with distinction or did all of this excellent exemplary work, it puts that kid at a disadvantage who has a really serious circumstance at home, and they don't have that opportunity. So I don't, from a point of view of equity, fairness, as Brad said before, the reality of actually having a realistic second semester term 4 class, I don't think that really we can do anything else and be genuine in what we're putting on the student's transcript. And as you said, it's not us, it's the whole country. So I think it certainly is going to be reflected in people's college application process that this is a little bit unusual time. So that's all.
Lisa?
Thank you. So when we're weighing this idea of equity versus trying to find a way to reward students for work done, I think there's no perfect answer. I don't think there's just no perfect answer. And I feel like we do have to be really careful about equity. I agree with what Cynthia said. The one point that I want to ask about, though, is that from some of the high school parents, and I don't have a high school child anywhere near it, and I don't really understand the whole, I don't completely understand the way you do once you have a child there, the way everything works. But I do know that there was a specific concern about some courses that spanned term 2 and term 3, and where kids had already earned, most of their grade. There was only a month left after doing all of term 2 and some of term 3, and that was also going to be counted as pass-fail. I'm wondering if we could pull out that one example. Okay, well, that's what a parent is specifically asking me. Their child is in a course that spans term 2 and term 3.
I'm not aware of any course that spans.
There aren't. There's 3 and 4.
Okay. Well, a parent.
I would suggest that parent reach out to a school committee member who has a high school student. They could
she has
a little better.
She has.
I'm wondering if she was saying that she had a child in a class that was simply term 3.
No, classes that are term 2, 3 are now pass-fail when they only missed 1 month of term 3.
That's not accurate.
There's no 2, 3 classes. You're either in a first semester or just a term. You can be in like a quarter class. Those are peppered in throughout the year. Or a second semester. Or you're in an AP class that goes terms 1, 2, and 3. Now, that's possible.
All right, I'm getting another text. I think that's what she's referring to. The ones that go 1, 2, and 3.
But those
already earned most of what.
So those aren't pass-fail. If you were in a term 1, 2, 3 AP class, you got the grade that you had as of March 12th, because in that case you had completed 80% of the class.
All right. Well, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, Lisa, I have a junior that also has some AP classes like that. So she has one class that is AP Psych, for example. It's a full semester plus a term, and they were like maybe 85. I don't know. They were pretty far along with that third term. So they're just going to get a grade for third term, and then they're done. But if you started for a second semester and you only got in this much of your first term of that semester, then you got graded on how well you were doing by that, first part of the semester. And then you just get pass-fail for the second class. So if you were really doing well the first term, you should be pretty okay for the rest of the year.
No, Cynthia, that's the real gist of the problem, though. For classes that began February and were only terms 3 and 4, a semester, just terms 3 and 4, the kids were about 6 weeks in when the shutdown happened, and they had grades, but now the whole semester is going to be graded pass-fail. They're not going to even get the grades from the first 6 weeks. That is at the heart of the problem. Sorry, you're still on mute. I can't.
Sorry, I'm just saying, I understand. I have a junior.
Yeah. I'm just clarifying, because what they're not going to get that grade. And I think what you were saying is that they were going to get it. Or were you saying different?
Brad, you were gonna respond, or are you good?
No, I'll let the committee members say what's going on at the high school.
Well, okay.
Well, apologies. I just, I was trying to air the concerns that I was hearing with my limited knowledge of how this works, but I think that may have answered the question. So
frankly, my suggestion is that any parent who has a question about this should be contacting can email their student's guidance counselor. With all due respect, rather than calling me or emailing members of your school committee, you should be reaching out to your school guidance counselor and understand. They can explain to you what the situation is and what the impact on the particular unique circumstance that your child is facing or that specific course.
Yeah.
It's interesting, while we were having this conversation, Andy raised his hand and I went, oh, I can't wait to hear what he's going to say, because he's a teacher at the high school. I'm going to echo what he said eloquently and what Cynthia said. And I understand, and I'll give you an example. I have a junior, but it's my 9th grader, my freshman, who is an overachiever. And she was stressing out the other night, Mom, I have an essay, it's due tomorrow. And, oh, honey, what, do you want me to bring you a cookie? Like, what do you want? And she said, well, it's already written, it's just not good enough. But I have all this other work to do. And I said, honey, it's credit, no credit. She's like, I can't do that. I don't operate that way. I can't do that. It has to be Sousa good, and on and on. And so I understand what it's like to have one of those. I've got one of each in my house. And I think that if we can find a way for teachers to vis-a-vis a college recommendation or a letter, but if there some differentiation or some credit to be given, it can't really be on a transcript for all the reasons that Andy said it. It's not an equitable solution. And I think you're putting, if you make it a transcript issue, you're putting more pressure on kids that tend to fall behind anyway. And in this environment, I think that we are foolish to think that we are going to go back into buildings this year. Massachusetts is the 3rd highest COVID positive tests in the country, and we're 15 for population. So, the guidelines, the federal guidelines that were released just before this call, Massachusetts has a long way to go, and our governor is a lot more conservative than the federal government in that regard. So I know, obviously, it's not a foregone conclusion. We can't talk in absolutes, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that we're not going back this year. And if it has to go into next year, we have the whole summer to figure it out. Thank you.
Brad, do you have any other further thoughts on that? Okay, any other questions about the grading? All right, any other update regards to COVID-19, Brad? No, okay. All right. So for new business, we have on the agenda FY21 budget discussion. Andy, Lisa, and Louise, anything? I was on mute the whole time, sorry.
That's all right. I was just going to give an update summary of the budget subcommittee meeting this week. And Andy and Lisa, if at any point you guys want to jump in, feel free. As I think everyone knows, we're meeting weekly right now with the 3 liaisons from the Finance Committee, as well as Selectwoman Tina Hine. So it's been a really good mixed group, if you will. And of course, Dr. Jackson and Mr. Bidet are there as well. This week, we had an important update from Ken Shada, chair of the Finance Committee. He attended virtually a meeting with what he calls the Council of Elders from the State House. It's a statewide sort of economic planning committee. I don't think they really have an official name, but it's the group that's getting together literally daily to figure out where the state stands financially, economically, and what the impact of that will be on local communities. So I wanted to share a few of those highlights and then their interpretation of where that leaves Holliston, and of course the implications for schools, the school budget. So basically, what Ken came back with is that things right now are, well, wait, let me start. I'm going to reveal the punchline first because I don't want anyone worried. I think we're going to be okay for FY20, more than okay, finishing out the year. And there may be a path toward ensuring that the town and the schools with some very conservative measures are also okay next year. But I want to share the data that gets us there because it is going to require some retrenching probably. So basically, the governor's message, I think, really kind of conveyed that things are as bad as I thought they would be. Even a week ago, trying to look at some projections, maybe even a tad bit worse based on some leading indicators coming from the market. Revenue from these were interesting numbers. Revenue from the state lottery, which of course is a key source of revenue, is down 33%. Was down 53% because of the nature of how I guess that game is played. I wouldn't know. I don't even know what it is. And scratch tickets are down 30%. So those metrics kind of just are beacons for us. Overall, state revenue is down at least 20%. That's $500 to $700 million. So the bottom line is that there's a significant shortfall for local aid, probably for FY21, in the ballpark right now of at least 15%. And that assumes things don't get worse. And I don't think anyone's really assuming that. That would translate into a cut in revenue of $4 to $5 billion versus the predictions that the governor had back in December. So that's meaningful. Those are very meaningful numbers. When you compare that to what the world looked like in 2008, at that time we experienced only a 13% drop. 2008, of course, was the Great Recession, and that 13% drop in revenue occurred over multiple years. We're looking at a much more significant drop occurring within a single year. And of course, unemployment is expected to rise to about 20% by the end of the second quarter. Normally, Massachusetts is a more resilient economic, in a more resilient economic position than other states because of what he referred to as eds and beds, meaning that our education and healthcare economy, which is a big part of the Commonwealth's economy, bolster us. But this is so different, this setback, that it's targeting us right where our core strength ordinarily would be. So obviously it's different. Having said that, Massachusetts is well-heeled compared to most states. We are among the top 5 states in the country for having a solid stabilization fund. And that's a good thing because they're going to have to tap that to support the economy over the coming 12 to 24 months. The most optimistic outlook for the state is that we will return to normalcy by the end of FY21. So that's like a solid 18 months away. But that would require some very meaningful and conservative action across the board at the state and local level to make sure that spending is tightened up. It's really a simple way to put it. The impact locally for Holliston, the Finance Committee is expecting a 10 to 15% cut in local aid for FY21, next year's budget cycle. And that's pretty meaningful. And that doesn't include anything else that's exceptional. And I know Brad will talk to this. We are facing as a town, what that really means is about $1 million gap in the operating budget for next year. Frankly, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So I was encouraged by that number. The Finance Committee did provide some general guidance as to where they think we need to be with respect to the budget next year. Without going into detail, because I think we're going to need to do that in executive session. Well, I don't think I can go into much more detail without us going into an executive session on that, because it does pertain to collective bargaining strategies. So, having said that, I would like to think that we will be able to work toward a solution for next year that is not terribly draconian, if that helps. However, we will finish this year as of, if we took a snapshot on the school's budgets at this point in time, with the assumption that we were going to go back on the 4th, which I don't think that's really happening, we would close the year with a surplus, largely because we aren't spending money on gas, utilities, substitutes, a couple of other things. And if the shutdown is extended, those savings would be realized as well. There are some other things where spending will increase because we're shut down, lunch program, et cetera. But we believe that we can protect our staff and the operating budget through the end of the year. And I think that's a very encouraging message that I wanted to share publicly. I know Dr. Jackson and Keith want to share that as well. It's an important one. It's important for our staff to know they have some security in this very uncomfortable environment right now. So we're committed to trying to maintain that. I don't know if anyone else on the budget subcommittee or Brad and Keith want to add anything to this right now. No? Okay. All right. So I think that's the update for now. Does anybody have any questions? Lisa?
I just wanted to add that I really appreciate the FinCom members, especially the, what are they, our liaisons?
Liaisons, yeah.
I love to yell at Ken Shada and Dan Alfred when I don't agree with them. And I know other members of this committee do too, but they have really, really, I feel like, bent over backwards to be sympathetic to where we're sitting and how things look from our perspective. And I feel like our weekly meetings have been productive, and I just feel like they have our back. I think they're going to do the best they can for us, and that's, very reassuring in a time like this. So I just wanted to publicly say thank you to them, and to Michelle as well. She's the other liaison, although I don't ever yell at Michelle. I only yell at Ken and Dan.
Michelle, nobody. Yeah, but they have, if this becomes a model for all of our working relationships and the future of our working relationships, then I think we couldn't ask for anything more. I don't know what else to say. It's been great.
It's been a very collaborative process, which has really been, I'm not sure it could be anything other than that at this point, because we really don't know what we're facing. And it's the small things that have struck me about the issues with finances in town. Like, for example, one of the examples Ken gave was scratch tickets and lottery ticket sales are down significantly, and that impacts money that flows to towns. And who would have ever thought of that? But if people aren't going out to stores, they're not buying scratch tickets, and therefore that money's not coming to the state, and it's not going to come to us. So when you think about how far-reaching this crisis is economically, it's really pretty striking. That's all. Thank you.
Does anyone have a question from the committee? No? All right. Thank you guys for that update. Keith, do you want to go over the April financial statement?
Certainly, thank you. Contained in your electronic packets is the April financial statement. You will see in big letters, this projection only accounts for a closure up till May 4th. Obviously, I can't project if we reopen, we'll be kind of stagnant here. If we go further, then there'll be more savings. But that's just, so anything here, so you don't need to ask questions about anything more than that. In addition, it also has no projections for return of any fees at this stage. Because again, we open on May 4th and it's going to be pretty much back to, standard business. So the first thing I want you to notice going down on the sheets there is I separated out, I have a couple of account numbers attached specifically to COVID expenses. So I gave it a dummy DESI function code to identify those. We've had to date about $22,000, $22,400 of COVID specific expenses, which are mostly the Chromebook purchase that we did to be able to conduct our remote learning. So that was the first item. The second item is classroom teachers. It's favorable due to leaves, which is offset with the long-term subs, which is slightly unfavorable due to those leaves. Our substitutes are favorable due to closures. Our guidance and adjustment counselors, there's another leave there that, again, it's unfavorable. It's favorable because of the leave, but again, the added unfavorable for the substitute piece. Transportation services are favorable due to closure, both for the contract, because we were able to negotiate a slightly lower rate for the closure days, and as well as for gas, so for the diesel fuel. We have obviously savings from not using any buses. Heating of buildings for fuel and utilities, it's favorable to closure. Utility services are favorable to closure. Technology was actually unfavorable because we had the website design costs in there. And then tuitions, the net of it was slightly favorable due to projection, and the rest of the changes were really due to reclasses of putting the children into the correct buckets. Some were a little bit off on how they were being charged. The net of this is a $223,000 budget balance, which is about $75,000 better. But again, there's still potential either more savings coming if we close longer, or less savings coming if we close longer as well because of the added lunch costs. The lunch program will be running a deficit this year, which you have to make up by law. They can't carry a deficit. So I'm getting projections right now. It's looking like if we close for the rest of the year, the loss in revenue would be slightly more than $200,000 based on the last couple of years of data. So that's going to be out there as well. So any questions? Cynthia.
Thank you, Keith. I'm actually curious about the school lunch program, because I thought that we had gotten a notification that they were going to reimburse us for the lunches. Is that not true? Because even though we were under 50%.
They're reimbursing, but you have to remember, we're not serving a ton of lunches. They can't reimburse us on lunches that aren't being served. So we're serving 65 to 75 lunches a day, as opposed to 300 lunches a day. So, so again, that's where it's a little bit tough to tack on to get very precise with the projection, because between the lower number and how much we're going to get reimbursed for, that's still a little up in the air. So. Anything else? Back to you, Stacy.
Thank you. Okay. I just need to report out to you the warrants that I have signed. There's a school warrant bill in the amount of $345,116.16. And there's a cafeteria bill in the amount of $5,204.98. In your packet, there are the minutes of the February 24th, 2020 Budget Subcommittee meeting. So thank you for those budget subcommittees. My recommendation is to actually add another meeting between now and May 7th. I'd like to recommend that we meet next Thursday, April 23rd, with the agenda items of old business, COVID-19 school closure update and discussion. And I don't know if it needs to be its own agenda item, but a budget FY20 update. If we need to make some changes or decisions or anything related to this year's budget.
I'll make a motion, Anne Louise. You made a motion, right? Or did you? What did you do?
I made a recommendation, but I will accept an emotion.
I'll second.
I'll make the motion then to do that, to have that meeting.
I second.
Okay, so there's a motion to hold a school committee meeting on Thursday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. Moved by Anne Louise Hanson, seconded by Don Naporski. Roll call vote. Ms. Hanstead.
Yes.
Mrs. Blistevnik.
Yes.
Ms. Koshin.
Yes.
Ms. Shaughnessy.
Yes.
Ms. Naborski.
Yes.
Mr. Morton.
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. Okay, we do need to meet an executive session for the purposes of collective bargaining strategy with the HFT teachers unit, for which we will not return. So is there an adjournment of, is there a motion to adjourn and move into executive session?
Moved by Cynthia.
Okay, seconded by Anne Louise.
Moved by Cynthia, seconded by Anne Louise. Roll call vote. Ms. Hanstead.
Yes.
Mrs. Blistevnik.
Yes.
Ms. Koshin.
Yes.
Ms. Shaughnessy.
Yes.
Ms. Naborski.
Yes.
Mr. Morton.
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. It is 8:22. Our open session is now complete. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stay safe, stay well. School committee, please stay on. Good night.
Good night.